and welcome to Season 2 of PBS 39's Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Tracy Yatsko, coming to you from our studio in the PPL Public Media Center in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Reporters Roundtable is designed to give local students a platform to spark dialogue on real issues of national, regional, and local concern. Later in the show, the panelists will discuss the latest in the grand jury investigation on sex abuse in the Catholic Church and mental health issues on campus. So before we begin, I want to thank you all so much for joining me on Season 2, and I truly look forward to the upcoming conversations. So let's get right into the headline this week, and that Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is being accused of sexual misconduct by Dr. Ford. Chantal Belafonte is going to give us an update.
So this week, the nation has waited to hear from Dr. Ford, the victim who allegedly accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct since the early 1980s. Dr. Ford's lawyers are saying that she'll be ready to testify as early as next Thursday.
And the responses have been absolutely overwhelming this week. So let's take a look at some of the responses from female celebrities and influencers on Dr. Ford.
You are a survivor.
A survivor.
A survivor.
And millions of us have your back.
You and your testimony are credible.
You and your testimony are credible.
You and your testimony are credible.
We believe you.
Remember that even before Brett Kavanaugh's name had been announced, that they were already opposing fill in the blank, stop, fill in the blank. Okay,
That's right.
That ad that you just played, that's a cult. Okay, these Hollywood liberal women belong to an unthinking cult.
So we've been seeing opposite views all week. What are your thoughts on the responses?
Well, I respect Dr. Ford. This is obviously a very stressful time for her right now, sharing her story about Kavanaugh allegedly sexually assaulting her. However, I kind of see where Michelle Malkin's coming from, because these celebrities are saying, you know, believe this, you know, he actually did it. But there is no evidence so far that Brett Kavanaugh did, in fact, sexually assault Dr. Ford.
My take on it is, you know, this video was coming and supporting and saying to Dr. Ford, we hear you, we support you, and what you've been going through should not have been made public without your consent. And towards the end, if you listen, they signed your sisters. We're supporting you, we're backing you. There's nothing wrong with that. They're not saying that this was actually true. What they're saying is that you possibly went through a horrific moment in your life, and there are women out there that don't know you and that want to support you.
You know, I would have to say, you know, I agree with you and Jack at the same time, actually, because, but I think that we should not be jumping to conclusion. I think either side should not be jumping to conclusion. So with this video is basically coming out and saying, with all these women, is saying that we believe that he did it. That's what it's kind of entailing. It's that, okay, now he's already guilty, and I'm not saying that he's not. I'm not saying, I don't know whether he's guilty or innocent, but the thing is, everybody is innocent until proven guilty. So when they do jump to that conclusion, then that causes some sort of, you know, issues. And then, but at the same time, we have the other side, you know, like Trump and Conway, you know, jumping to conclusions of also backing up Brett Kavanaugh. So, like, isn't that the same thing? Isn't that both sides here are jumping to conclusions? And I think what we should do is really just take a step back and kind of let the due process take part. And then from there, we can voice our opinions based on the facts. But what's happening is that we're really not waiting for any facts. We're just all just coming out and speaking. I mean, there has been people who've been coming out to support both sides.
So let's talk about President Trump's response. Earlier this week, he said he wants to hear her story. Last night, he said, why didn't someone call the FBI 36 years ago? What's your take on President Trump?
When you are a victim of sexual misconduct of any sort, it takes years as a victim, I believe, to go through that, to process what you've been through. And victims typically just, you know, with track records showing, they don't come out as fast because they're ashamed. They feel as if, like, this was my fault, I caused this. They go through years and years and years of therapy. And what I believe in Dr. Ford's case is now that Brett Kavanaugh is going for this position and may be confirmed, it sparked, you know, her horrific memories. Everything came back to her. It takes a while for victims to actually go through this, and I think that we're not being sensitive to the issue that when you go through a situation like this, when you have been taken advantage of, as she is claiming, it does take a while to come out and give your truth.
Let's talk about some of the governmental officials' responses. We have some tweets. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren says, Brett Kavanaugh is up for a lifetime appointment to the nation's highest court. Dr. Ford and the American people deserve a full investigation. Republicans shouldn't rush this. We need to take time to get it right. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says requiring an FBI investigation of a 36-year-old allegation without specific references to time or location before Professor Ford will appear before the Judiciary Committee is not about finding the truth, but delaying the process till after the midterm elections. And finally, Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, if Senate Dems think that they need the FBI to investigate, why didn't they alert the FBI on July 30th? As soon as I learned of the allegations from the Washington Post on Sunday, I moved swiftly to follow up on Dr. Ford's allegations, as the FBI has said its role here is complete. Is history repeating itself? How is the government handling this? This happened with Anita Hill. What is your take?
So I think this absolutely is a case of history repeating itself. Anita Hill has said that her hearings were poisoned almost by the lack of neutrality in the questionings that she faced. And what we're seeing now is obviously Senate Judiciary, Dems and Republicans are biasing any attempt at a neutral hearing by being so outrightly partisan about the fact that it's just an investigation that she's requesting. And it's just neutral professional questioning she's asking from herself. So the partisanship here is kind of scary when you think about it, because you would think that in the Senate's role to advise and consent on the most qualified individual for our highest court, they would be able to put aside partisanship and these dirty political games for the higher ideals that they represent. But this, again, it's repeating itself because we've yet to see a protocol enforced for last-minute allegations against top-ranking officials, because, again, we saw it happen with Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. So the fact that there was no institutional measure enacted to at least respond to this more appropriately when these things come out, I think it says a lot about what the Senate is actually willing to do and what they're willing to accomplish.
Natasha?
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally agree. And if you look at this, this is not an issue of politics. This is a woman's story that has become political. And Grassley's tweets are just, they're not bipartisan here. He starts off by saying that Ford deserves to be heard, and then goes on to mention Senate Dems. If Senate Dems think they need the FBI to investigate, why didn't they alert the FBI? Don't know why Dems are refusing to cooperate with the CMTE's investigation. I hope Dems will join me. This is not Democrat, Republican. This is a larger issue of a woman's story attacking or alleged, accusing these accusations against someone who is a nominee for the highest ranking court in the United States of America. And furthermore, this is a president who's accused of paying off a prostitute that is now backing this nominee. So although her allegations are not proven yet, they deserve to be heard and they deserve the right to be proven. And I agree with Elizabeth Warren saying that the American people deserve a full investigation, especially for someone of this high order.
Yeah, I agree with you that, she should be heard. However, Chuck Grassley does have a point. This letter was submitted on July 30th, and, Dianne Feinstein could have released this. It's a very serious matter, and I think because of that, you need to take action right away instead of waiting for moments like this, because, it's almost politically motivated.
The matter of taking action, it's very difficult in this case, because I think what Dr. Ford is really focusing on is she wants security. So trying to rush this process does no good for her. Let's just keep in mind here, like Natasha said, I mean, she's a victim. Let's not make this a political thing. Like, she's a victim and her story needs to be heard, but it does need to be heard on her level where she's comfortable. And she does want safety because she has been receiving a lot of death threats.
Well, with what Jack was saying as well, so her Feinstein not acting on this right away, it might have been, I mean, it seems to be leaning more towards the fact that might have been a political strategy move for the Democrats. But however, regardless of whether or not it was a political move or if it was not, it's still the fact that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted Dr. Ford. So even if this was a politically charged move, rather than just someone who wanted to do the right thing, we still need to look at this being a crime that happened, and this is a person that's running for a very high level office, and we have to take, as Elizabeth Warren said, we have to conduct a full investigation. I think that's definitely something that we need to do, and I think as well, the hearing shouldn't just happen prematurely without the full investigation, because when things like that happen and Dr. Ford comes forward and tells her story, it's going to be very easy for the Republicans to poke at her story and figure out ways to combat it.
Yeah, I agree with you that she needs to be heard. I just think, they should have acted upon this much sooner.
Jack, is the timing convenient? Absolutely. However, is this a claim that needs to be investigated? Absolutely. Again, like Mo said, this is someone who is taking or attempting or being nominated to take the highest level of government, essentially, is what we're talking about. And this is an issue that really deserves, on both parties and on both terms, to be heard and investigated to the fullest extent.
Okay, thank you all for this discussion. We're going to take a quick break. Coming up, sex abuse in the Catholic Church. How do we move forward from something so horrific? We'll be right back.
PBS 39 News Tonight.
Welcome back to PBS 39's Reporters Roundtable. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro held a roundtable discussion earlier this week on the grand jury investigation into sex abuse in the Catholic Church. One of the grand jury recommendations is the possibility of eliminating the statute of limitations for sexually abusing children. Mohab, what are your thoughts on statute of limitations?
I think we should absolutely get rid of it. We should follow through with Josh Shapiro's recommendation, because these things happen to children that were so young that obviously they did not know what was going on, and I heard one of the victims during one of the interviews was saying, when they told me that the priest, he wanted to spend time with me, I was happy, because to me that's the person, that's almost like a father figure to you. And to, just when this is happening, you're not thinking, oh, I have to report this in a specific time because the statute of limitations says so, otherwise it wouldn't be credible. That's not what a kid is thinking when this is going on. And that's something that we really need to take into consideration, as well as the psychological aspect of it and what it does to a person's life. Many of the victims have said things such as, when they did this to me, it didn't just change me, it killed a part inside of me.
And I think we also have to understand what the purpose of a statute of limitations is in the first place. They're enacted to try to prevent unreliable witness testimony if someone comes forward much later on after the fact. But in these cases, we're seeing that 50, 60 years after reporting, these allegations overwhelmingly are true. And the statute of limitations is just a very unnecessary barrier to seeking and receiving justice for ills committed against you by the Catholic Church, whose hierarchy and their structure of power is such that it allows for them to get away with these kinds of just horrific acts.
I would agree. I think this is absolutely disgusting what these priests did. And like what Mo was saying, these were kids being abused. They might not realize that this is sexual abuse at the time, and it might take, so many years for them to finally realize, all right, this was messed up. I need to report this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if a kid is 5 years old and takes a cookie from the cookie jar, they're not going to report that as being wrong, and a kid doesn't know what the word sexual assault is. And let's talk about what is the statute of limitations. What is sexual assault anymore in our society? I mean, it's sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. Assault is all a cliche. So, children that are being abused or taken advantage of are not necessarily understanding the implications or the wrongdoing of these priests who are, as Mo mentioned, such a father figure to them.
What would you all like to see happen? Where do we go from here?
I think there is absolutely a need for mass reform in the Catholic Church, in canon law, in the structure of the clergy. One of the things that is absolutely fascinating to me about the Catholic Church is their rigidity in basically pressuring the celibacy of priests. It's very outdated, and not only is it outdated, it's obviously proven to be unhealthy, because the forced celibacy of priests plus their almost unquestionable power in their local communities allows them to both get away with and help cover up this abuse, but it also enables it in a lot of ways. Churches, the vast majority of other denominations of Christianity allow for married priests, they allow for women priests, they allow for priests to be human. And that's not what's happening in the Catholic Church. And if they don't reform, this is just going to continue to be a unique systemic problem for their religion.
I think what we're seeing here is something called church silence. You know, there's silence on this end when something doesn't look good on the outside. And let's just give an example for the Catholic Church in the setting. This is church silence, and I have experienced it because I have been in the church for years on different ends, and I've seen this happen to multiple people, and the church will support their priests. Regardless of if the priest is doing wrong, the church will back you up, meaning still support you financially, your living expenses, you're still getting paid, and regardless of what you're doing, until you have been proven guilty, the church will back you up, and this church silence has to stop.
What does this say about power in this country, in this world? People who have elite status?
I think it just shows you have to be on guard all the time, no matter who you're with now, because it could be people you trust, like in this case, and they could be abusing you. So you just always have to be on the lookout for signs of abuse, harassment, whatever it may be. I mean, like look at Larry Nassar, for example. These gymnasts trusted him.
But let's look at that a little bit more, because we are absolutely willing to believe these children who have been sexually abused by Catholic priests. We are willing to believe the testimony of the gymnasts who were abused by their coach. But when we look at Dr. Ford coming forward with, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier briefly, she comes forward with credible testimony that has been corroborated by a therapist back to 2012. And yet the entire dialogue is, it's not fair to Brett Kavanaugh. So it says a lot about power dynamics too, because we're not willing to threaten the institution of the church. But when it comes to believing women who accuse very powerful, namely men, we automatically side against the woman.
I think what's happening is that people are so invested in their priests and they're afraid to come forward.
I think it says a lot about gender roles too. You know, if you look at these institutions and establishments that we're referring to, Brett Kavanaugh, the church, priests, they're male. And we're talking about a woman coming forward, with this corroborated account and story, like we said about Ford, and people are still not willing to give it the recognition that, not all people, but most are not willing to give it the recognition it deserves. So it's really an interesting matter.
Okay, thank you all. We're going to take one more quick break, but when we return, we're heading to the campus.
Come on, let's go! Tune in to Let's Go, the only weekly guide to what's going on, where to go, and what to do in and around the greater Lehigh Valley. Thursday at 7:30 p.m. and Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back to PBS 39's Reporters Roundtable. We tend to hear about mental health issues on campus around final season, but we're going to talk about it right now because this is a serious issue. According to the American Psychological Association, 1 in 3 college freshmen worldwide report symptoms consistent with a diagnosable mental health disorder. The American College Health Association reports that 39% of college students feel so depressed they have a hard time functioning, and 61% say they have overwhelming anxiety in the previous 12 months. Jack, you're working on a story right now at your school. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so at Centenary University right now, I'm working on this story, and the one thing that grabbed my attention about this with mental health is they sent out an email to the Wellness Center at Centenary that said suicide is the second leading cause of death in college students. And, that's really crazy to think about. And also a study that caught my attention by psychologist Cindy Liu at Brigham and Women's Hospital that she did with 67,000 college students from over 100 campuses. She found that 1 in 5 students had thoughts of suicide and 1 in 10 actually attempted it.
What is happening on campus? Why are students so stressed out?
There's just too much going on. It's not just simply us going to class anymore. We have to worry about way more of just class. I mean, first thing just that every student encounters is the tuition. You know, it's very high, you know, that we have to pay. Like for me at Temple University, and Tracy, I'm sure you're aware as well, being a Temple alum, is that I pay $20,000 a year. Obviously, that includes I get financial aid, and then I have some loans, and then I'm still on top of that, I'm paying a little bit out of my pocket as well. However, and the crazy part about that is that $20,000 a year, that's still considered cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for me personally, this is just from my own personal experience, is that, you know, I'm constantly worried, am I gonna be able to afford the next term? Am I gonna be able to afford the next semester or not? You know, while I have tests that I have to study for, and then you have like extracurricular activities that you would like to be a part of, because, you know, now the employers out there, they don't just want you to graduate college with a degree. Mm-hmm. A degree is not gonna get you a job anymore. It's a degree and experience. You're graduating, most likely expected to have at least had one internship, some job experience, mm-hmm. or any type of extracurricular activities on campus that contribute to your career. So I'm not sure how it is on you guys' college campuses, but that's just on my personal experience as well.
Yeah, I can speak to Drexel's. I probably Chantal and I both can. Drexel's cost of attendance is around $70,000 a year. And on top of that cost of attendance, besides, you know, the academics that are obviously a little bit more intense, we have the cooperative educational program there, which is amazing, and it's a great resource for students to get this hands-on learning experience in the workplace, mm-hmm. but is also pressuring because now students, on top of a part-time job to afford the attendance, you know, academics, extracurriculars, and other activities, are now worried about finding a co-op job and securing that end-all, be-all, wonderful, I have a job at graduation position that comes from the co-op, yeah.
And in addition to what Natasha is saying, you know, at Drexel with the co-op, you have to maintain your co-op for 6 months, or you have to be working in your current field. I think what's going on here is pressure. And what we're hearing is not really academic pressure, but pressure of remaining in school due to finances, and then after school, as a student, you're thinking about your end goal, and that adds a lot of pressure. Am I going to be able to keep this co-op? Will I be able to get a job? Am I going to be able to afford next semester, next year? And these are all pressures, along with just adjusting to that campus's lifestyle and how everyone operates and the culture there. So I think when it comes down to looking at, you know, what is actually causing the suicide rate to go up, it's a lot of factors, and unfortunately, it's not even about just doing your homework anymore. It's gone beyond that.
And I think students now are so much more aware. We have so much more to lose, because the reality is college has become the new high school diploma, and your master's degree is now almost a requirement in any field you're working in. And if you have private loans, you're constantly thinking, you know, am I ever gonna stop paying interest? Am I ever gonna get to my principal? If you're the first in your family to go to college like I am, it's a whole different dynamic. You're going from something that's kind of comfortable in high school, working your way your entire life to college, and then you realize, you know, you have 4 years to distinguish yourself from every other qualified person in the country to get the job you want. And not only that, you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life once you declare that major at the end of your sophomore year, or when you decide what internships you want to do, or if it's just, the stress level is completely unreal. And especially at Lehigh, there's a very significant attitude of work hard, play hard. And it's, you do all your work, you do all the involvement you can think of, but you have fun on the side. The party culture is completely insane at a lot of universities, not just Lehigh. But what that leaves is this absolute lack of ability to take care of yourself and to recognize when stress becomes anxiety and when lack of motivation becomes depression. And even though it's become destigmatized and people are seeking more help for it, we have to talk about the lack of resources that college students have on their campuses, because when you're waiting 2 and 3 weeks for a counselor's appointment and you're in crisis, that could be the difference between life and death.
And depending on where your campus is located, if you're not in the city, you are not accessible to these counseling services that's outside. If your university is located in a rural area, it's going to be hard for you to get there. You know, then you have now the pressure of, if I have a car, how am I going to get there? And if I'm working, do I have enough money to get there, back and forth? All these things play a major factor, and sometimes being on campus and being in situations, everyone's so concerned about what they're going through that they miss what their friends are going through, because we're all going through the same thing. We're all worried about our future and how we're going to manage and survive, especially with paying back our student loans.
There are definitely a lot of young people who are becoming more vocal about mental health. I want to take a look at a few tweets from college students. One tweet reads, "College tests so much more than what you have learned in class. Your mental health turns into how much more can I take before another breakdown, while your physical health turns into how many more hours can I force myself to be awake. LOL, maybe that's just me." Another tweet reads, "This is a big mood and why my mental health was so disgracefully poor my whole first year at Trinity. The narrative of I should be happy but I'm not, so there's something wrong with me, ruined my first and most of my second and third years at college as I tried to recover." This is a very serious issue. What have you all learned throughout your process? Time management, stress management. How have you helped yourself get through college?
Well, for me, Tracy, is I personally I'm not diagnosed with any sort of anxiety or anything like that. But for me, even then, I've come to terms with the fact that I'm always going to be stressed, and there's just no getting away from it. And I think I've almost become numb to the fact that there will be always some sort of stress.
And that shouldn't be normal.
That should not be normal. And you know what? With the tweets that you mentioned of when is my next breakdown going to be, this is not the first time I'm hearing this. I've had personal friends who discuss this with me, and they say, you know, it's always just, how long am I going to last before I'm going to have to break down again and maybe go cry in my room at night? How many days can I last, or how many hours can I last? Who knows?
College students, we're running on empty. I know one of the big things I notice on my campus is the way that classes are scheduled. You sometimes have 6 straight hours of classes or 5 straight hours of classes where you don't have enough time to go get lunch. And it's become this popular conversation of, oh, like I haven't eaten in 24 hours, like I'm gonna go eat a piece of cake and see if I can make it. Or making coffee and staying up for like 3 consecutive all-nighters. And it's just, we've become so adapted to it. And the problem is no one has offered any alternatives to this level of stress, and we need that.
Thank you all so much for today's discussion. And thank you to those watching at home for joining the roundtable with us. And we hope you come back every Friday night after PBS 39 News Tonight and Sundays at 5:30 p.m. Follow PBS 39 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our website, pbs39.org/reportersroundtable. We want to hear your voices, so hashtag PBS 39 Reporters Roundtable, and your questions and thoughts can be featured on the show. Until next Friday for PBS 39, I'm Tracy Yatzko. Have a great night.